that's one of the difficult parts when I think someone is kind of awakening to what I call like their multidimensional self, right? And this is kind of common in the spiritual realm right now. It's like people, especially because a lot of what is available to people kind of can shoot people right up and out pretty
Yeah.
quickly into those other places and selves and all this stuff and that's great, but like we're human. We need to be here, we need to be centered in our body here in the present, in the now. And so it's like we can coexist in those places, but it's definitely. And when stuff gets hard, that's and we have already kind of opened those doorways, that's actually when that can get. And because those doorways are open and I also wasn't just energetically clean, I um th- there was just an element of I was going into realms like in my
Mhm.
dreams and and whenever I didn't have like my own kind of energetic sovereignty, it felt like, because of what I was doing, that were really gnarly. I mean, I'd call them hell realms, really.
Brian, welcome to my podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be
Yeah.
here.
Yoo-hoo. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your healing journey, and why you chose to be here today.
Beautiful. Yeah, so my name is Brian. I do go by Way Shower in a lot of my public spaces. It's kind of like my musician name turned public persona type of thing that I'm moving through right now. So if you ever see me go by Way Shower, that's why. But my friends call me Brian, so anybody can call me either or. And I I am a musician. I'm a sound therapy practitioner. I am also a mentor for helping healers and what I call like new earth visionaries, really up leveling their skills and abilities, and their ability to receive exchange for their services through tapping into their intuition, like their true unique gifts and skills, kind of moving beyond modalities and systems and things like that, and really helping them utilize their own experience and their own gifts, learned and intrinsic, in order to really help other people in a greater way. And you know, to sum up my healing journey, I would say that I don't use this term lightly, but I have been walking the path of I would call a shamanic initiation for a number of years now. And I call it that because it's definitely marked by some very specific types of initiations that I've been guided through, as well as just certain ways that s- mm, social initiations that we all go through. Well, not all of us, but like some people go through, for example, like fatherhood, and what that initiation has kind of shown me in a reflection and in a light, shining lights on areas of that initiation journey that are kind of specific to the archetypes of me showing up as someone who's supposed to serve in the way that I do in the world. And so that's like the best way I like to just sum it up, obviously without going into a lot of detail, but that is also how I serve others. And usually the people that I'm drawn to and that are coming to me organically are those who are going through similar initiatory processes, people that have like just this real deep latent power that they're having either trouble bringing through or have some things covering it, distorting it, whatever you want to call it, and helping them through that. So that's, I hope that was coherent enough. I'm just kind of like riffing on that summary.
Yeah, it's potent. Yeah, I love it. Like I've taken notes that as you were speaking, that's perfect. Yeah, I hear people come to you in that shamanic place of, oh, maybe I've hit rock bottom. Maybe I'm in this. What do I need? Like what's actually going on? And who you are as an individual and your vibrancy, your frequency, whatever you put out there is like, nah, Brian Brian Wayshower, he's the one for me, right?
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely.
Beautiful.
Great synopsis.
Beautiful. Thank you. Um, and you have a little 4-year-old son, and I'm recently a dad myself. And like for me, I tried co-sleeping with him last night. So let's give it a shot. No, let's try it
Mhm.
out. Didn't like it. So like using your like, and using I think using our kids as a catalyst for growth as well has been so potent. Like for me, all this stuff that's coming up for me that I thought I looked at, so oh my god, like the concept of innocence and responsibility and accountability and setting an example and leadership has really shown up for me. In your son, I mean, you've got like 4 years advantage on me. What's been your journey with your son in catalyzing your growth?
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna get kinda deep and raw and a little bit uncomfortable probably right off the bat if we're gonna go
Great.
down this route, if that's
Please.
alright, but I think that's
Absolutely.
it's important because, um, to be completely transparent and honest, it's been the toughest years of my life, that what you said about shedding light on things that you might have previously not even been aware of or maybe thought you healed. I did a lot of healing work, in a lot of different ways, like working with plant medicines and like working through like my alcoholism and addiction stuff before I had met my partner. And when we met, we got to work pretty quick. She was like pregnant within the first 5 months of us, 4 months, something like that, of us being together. And so it was an organic and spirit led relationship that was also like a rocket ship. And so I was living in my hometown in Northern California, had a really deeply nourishing support community there, had all these different ways that I had over the previous years kind of built mechanisms and connections that had originally kind of helped me get through like my alcoholism, and then were just kind of really nourishing my spirit and helping me heal. I was doing fairly frequent plant medicine journeys, around that time, and uncovering a lot of stuff, healing a lot of things. And then when I met my partner, it was just like I moved out of Northern California into the desert, Arizona. She was pregnant, new long-term relationship. It was just like all these things happened at once. And I didn't handle it well. I really didn't. Fatherhood was really hard for me. And it's taken me up until literally probably the beginning of this year to get to a point where I feel like I, have at least uncovered and done enough targeted healing work around some of the things that were making it really difficult. Because uh, to sum it up, um, I started drinking when it got too hard again. And that led to, getting violent with my son, with my partner. Um, not in like a wild, like I'm beating everyone up thing, but still there was anger, and there was, I hit my son, and I like, and it was just like a rage, in a
Mm.
lot of ways, because there was so much that had been brought up around this like responsibility of being a father. And then again, just up until recently, didn't not understanding that it was really, I knew it was triggering deep things within me, but what was happening was I was so reactive, and then retreating into the alcohol space, that it was like I knew something was there, but I wasn't getting like deeper into it. And recently, over the last year or so, really uncovering that it's like it was just really triggering things from not only like my childhood, but like past lives. I don't know if you talk about that on this
Yeah,
podcast,
we go
but
everywhere, bro. Yeah.
it's a big part of my work. It's a big part of my partner's work. We would talk about this stuff all the time because we work with people specifically on kind of working through past life trauma, that we end up uncovering. So uncovered all these different layers that had just been triggered, and that I didn't face well for a number of years. It's like the triggers were there, the catalysts were there for growth, and the opportunity for growth was there, but it was just like I ran from it, I fought it, and that just made it worse, right? So yeah, so it's been an intense an intense number of years. But there's been a lot of healing, and I couldn't ask for a more beautiful and angelic and supportive family. It's like my partner is simultaneously like a beautiful reflection who's just like, I mean, she's from Philadelphia, East Coast, like she's straightforward, like take no bull. So she doesn't like she just doesn't let me go. She doesn't let me play the victim. She doesn't let me try to, project the victim onto her. So that's been a simultaneously the biggest blessing, but also one of the biggest triggers for me is
Totally.
in the first couple of years, I was just such a scared little boy around everything. So it was just like everything was like, her reflections back to me about how I was not, showing up was just like, no, like I won't look at this, and just super triggering and all that kind of stuff. But obviously, in hindsight, once I and I think anyone who might identify kind of get to the other side and see it, how important that kind of reflection is and was, that's when I was like, oh man, that's why you're the perfect partner for me.
Mhm.
you know so yeah, that's where I've been in that process. And uh, you know s- super grateful for every ounce of opportunity I've had to grow through it. And really, I've sat with and I've moved through a lot of really heavy feelings, around it, because there's some places that I tread that I was sure I would never would if I had a child or was a father or a partner or that kind of thing. And so that was definitely a lot of healing work to kind of get through that element of it.
Beautiful. Yeah, thank you, Brian. And thank you for speaking to all of that. Like, I really feel that honesty and transparency is so healing.
Mm-hmm.
And anyone that's listening who's been to this place or like feels what you were saying, like in the resonance and what you're saying, will feel that too. Like get those goosebumps or that drop into those feelings. So I hear that that comes through in your work, because I hear that clarity of just like, this is the human condition. This is what I've been going through. This is my life, and having that safety of like, no, this is what life is like, right? So people just fall into your healing space, right?
Mm-hmm.
And just become freer. In that, what you mentioned, I don't know if I heard it correctly. Did you say something called phase well? PHASE, phase
I
well?
don't think so. I don't think I
Right.
used that word, although I have used it in the past.
Yeah, because I'm like, oh, that's really cool. Like the like the phasing in the concept of like you having a learning, a shamanic journey, and then phasing in and out of what reality is for you. Like, oh, I can't. I'm I'm not really completely integrated. I'm still like fluctuating between these different versions of me, my old self, new self, past life self.
Yeah, and that's
Yeah,
actually, and that did happen.
right.
That really did happen, 'cause I think that's one of the difficult parts when I think someone is kind of awakening to what I call like their multidimensional self, right? And this is kind of common in the spiritual realm right now. It's like people, especially because a lot of what is available to people kind of can shoot people right up and out pretty
Yeah,
quickly into those other places and selves, and all this stuff. And that's great, but like, we're human. We need to be here. We need to be centered in our body here, in the present, in the now. And so it's like we can coexist in those places, but it's definitely. And when stuff gets hard, that's and we have already kind of opened those doorways, that's actually when that can get. And because those doorways are open, and I also wasn't, just energetically clean, I um, th- there was just an element of, I was going into realms like in my dreams and whenever I didn't have like my own kind of energetic sovereignty, it felt like, because of what I was doing, that were really gnarly. I mean, I'd call them hell realms, really.
yeah.
And whatever that means and whatever that kind of translates for anyone else, I think what it translates for me is just that again, that kind of notion where it's like, I do feel like that when you start opening up your awarenesses in certain ways, and then you go through these particular initiation processes, it becomes even more important to really get grounded and integrate and like and work on, first like getting as balanced and healed in this kind of moment right now, before you kind of keep playing in those realms or whatever, might be the pull. And just recognizing that sometimes, yeah, there is just that feeling of just having a hard time just existing in one space at one time, like being in this reality and kind of like phasing like in and out,
Mm.
either at will or not at will. So all of that stuff I think can be kind of triggered, and this is why I use the term the shamanic initiation path, because those are kind of specific markers around what I feel like is an archetype of someone who's meant to help other people, but kind of gets like thrown into these fires that
Yeah.
like are multidimensional in nature and are meant to kind of teach us how to really, bridge the gap between the two and do it in a way that's like holding our energetic sovereignty and understanding the power and the medicine that we carry, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. It really does, and I love how you explain that. When you go back and listen to this, you'll be like, "God damn, this is unreal." I mean, this stuff that's coming out of my mouth. I know this stuff. Yeah, I love it. I love what you're saying. It's really speaking to me, and I think it's really important for people to hear who get on those journeys and they feel like the out of phase and they
Hmm.
don't know how to ground themselves. And I think that's where, like with sound healing in particular, it's a it's such a multi-dimensional creative art form healing modality. Talk more about it. How did you get into sound healing? Like, why did you choose it?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a musician, that I've been doing that since, since I was young, but getting back into it as an adult, I picked up a guitar back in like 2005 and, um, went to school for music, ended up just kind of getting a general music degree. And that's during this whole time, I was really kind of hitting the partying and the drugs and alcohol and things. And so by the time I got out of college, I was really like rock bottom actually. And so I got sober about a year after that, after getting out of college. And then um you know did some kind of I just did some jobs like where I was working in sales, just kind of getting my life back together. And then I kind of hit this point where I was like working this like corporate sales job. I had been playing music and doing the singer-songwriter thing for a while, but then I was just starting to have that like, this job is killing me. This life is killing me. I had bounced from a couple of jobs already, just kind of like, oh, this one's better, this one's better. But then it's like, okay, this isn't what I'm supposed to be doing with my soul and my
Mm,
reality. And I think I just started putting out the feelers of like, okay, I'm a musician. What can I do to help other people with that? Like other than performing, because I was, doing that. And that's when like the concept of like music therapy came up. And that's kind of like a degree based like social work route. And then sound healing just kind of came up. I think there was actually a gentleman in my hometown, which is fairly small, who was kind of like the only sound healing dude in the town. And I went to like one of his sessions and was just blown away because he did all the things, played didgeridoo and had all this stuff. And shortly after that, a friend of mine had encountered a book by this man named Fabian Maman called The Tao of Sound, and she shared it with me, and I bought it immediately, picked it up and like read a few pages and was immediately like hooked. Fabian was made famous back, fairly famous in certain circles, we'll say, back in the 80s, because he got a hold of a Kirlian camera. Have you heard of Kirlian photography?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So he knew someone who had access to Kirlian photography, and what he did is he met them in France, where he's from, and they did an experiment where they took pictures with the Kirlian photography of living pools of blood cells, and played different sounds for them, human voice, like different instruments. And what he photographed was that the electromagnetic frequency spectrum, or the aura, of the cells, would light up with all these different colors and in different
Mm,
ways, and there was always like a specific type of sound or frequency that would make a particular pool of blood cells light up like most dynamically. um, And so I just read the part of the book where he did that like experiment, and I was like, this is so cool. And
Hmm.
I looked on the back of the book, and there was a phone number there. So long story short, after that, I called the phone number and spoke with his partner Terrace, and then I ended up studying under them. They had a level 1 and level 2 certification, which was each one was 2 weeks intensive that they offered in Switzerland. So I went to Switzerland 2 summers in a row, did their level 1, level 2, and I am so eternally grateful that I was able to study under this man. He actually just recently passed away.
Wow.
Because he was up there in age, and his underlying feeling and just perception of sound was just really profound. He was a very subtle practitioner. Like everything he did was about subtlety. His whole practice was
Mm.
actually inspired and kind of built on Chinese medicine. So he was actually one of the first people, and he claims the first one, but to bring the concept of using tuning forks on like acupuncture points to the United States back in like the late 80s. And his practice was very subtle. Like his version of a sound bath or like a group sound ceremony was actually all very light and spacious elemental sounds. Like,
Mm.
and he kind of ascribed those sounds to the different like chakras. And so it's like for the root chakra, we would literally just walk around the room and like hit rocks together like lightly, and
Oh,
then
wow.
and then like drip water and just do things like that. And honestly, it's just he was so ahead of the curve, I think, in that regard.
Yeah, I've
Because
got goosebumps. As you tell me, I've got goosebumps. Like I could
yeah,
imagine what that
yeah.
would feel like, bro. That feels great. Yeah.
It is, and it is. It's like it really opens you up to just the profound understanding that first of all, it's like nature's the ultimate sound healer, right?
Yeah.
And really just like natural sounds just really trigger that deeper archetypal like resonance within us.
Yeah.
And just the perception of the subtlety of sound. And right around when I did his second level of training, I also started working with ayahuasca and going into plant ceremonies, having just the perception of how sound helps to heal. That was a whole other realm that was opened up to me around the subtlety of sound, because it's in those spaces. I don't know if you've ever experienced them or not. Have you been
I
in?
sat ayahuasca in Brazil.
You
Yeah,
did?
and
Okay.
and the Yawan hours, their music, they'll
Mm,
play for like all day, all day. I'm like, and it
mhm,
keeps you so grounded. Like they just don't stop. And
mhm.
I'm like, thank God that music is there. Like there's just something that's in it that makes it works. They work together. The medicine and the music just work together.
Absolutely. I mean, it really does go hand in hand. Um, and and in those ceremonies, like I saw that interplay of the medicine and the music, and then also just was really I started just getting really strong visions of just seeing how sound moves through space, and just really understanding that the heightened senses that we have in those ceremonies is not, it's not augmenting these things, unrealistically. We're tuning into the subtlety of how powerful sound is, for example. And so just like all of that stuff really kind of built a foundation and practice where um, I'm not as extreme as Fabian was, because I would call him extreme because he was like, don't use anything electronic. He didn't like crystal singing bowls because they were too like abrupt and sharp, and whatever his
Yeah.
kind of things were. And I kind of bridge a little bit more of a gap, I think, with some of the stuff that he was not, encouraging us not to do. Um, but because my practice was built on that, I still really do work with subtleties. And
Mhm.
one of the main things that I pulled away from his practice, and that I've just moved through more and more, is that I use this word archetypes a lot for many different things. And I think with sound specifically, that the way that I look at healing with sound is being able to just artfully open up a space that is going to be as inviting as possible to a person's own self-healing properties and energies and abilities. Um, there is such a subjective interaction with sound, that, you know, it's kind of a mission of mine to kind of dispel some of the sound healing myths out there, because there's a lot of focus right now, for example, on like frequencies, like this note does this frequency
Yes,
does that.
thank you. Please go
And
there.
and you know what I found and understand is that, like, I love talking about this because a lot of people bring up cymatics for this. Are you familiar with cymatics?
No, please explain it.
So cymatics is, if you know, you can do a Google search. Basically, Hans Jenny was the gentleman that first explored this, and Hans Jenny took a metal plate with sand and vibrated frequencies through that metal plate, and found that the sand would, like, you know, move into these like static shapes according to each, like, once it got to a certain frequency, as it went up, the shapes would get more complex. And what's interesting about that is that, you know, sometimes people will try to say that that means that a particular frequency does a particular thing, because they'll see a picture of, like, you know, some frequency and a picture that relates to it and be like, oh, okay, that frequency makes that picture. But what's interesting about cymatics is that it's completely unique to the experiment. So the material of the plate, the
Mm,
material you're putting on the plate, the size of the plate, and the frequency all make that experiment what it is. And the reason this is important is that when you think about sound interacting with a human being, you know, human beings are all very unique. I call them liquid crystals. Like, we're,
yeah.
you know, these walking kind of liquid crystals that are all very unique within this framework of the human vessel, because it's like we have a particular framework, but it's all, you know, very unique what's in there in terms of how we're kind of oriented in particular ways. And so cymatics really shows us that it's about the interaction of the sound and the frequency of the sound with the material, and what that material is, the size, the shape, and all of that. And that's what produces that, like, oops, the the shape
Yeah.
that we see, like the pictures and the colors and all that kind of stuff. So that in that cymatic picture is really, that's the representation of the interaction between those two things. And
Mm.
so that's why my the principles driving my sound practice are all about, okay, how can I, as a practitioner, again going back to intuition, how can I intuitively understand how sound is going to affect a particular person I'm working with, and how can I create a landscape and a scenario, an experience that's going to allow them to drop into their own intrinsic healing process. And when I work one on one with people, you know, I'm they're not always just on the table. Like, we're using sound in whatever dynamic way it's supposed to. So sometimes I have them get up and I'm drumming as they're shaking and doing, you know,
Mm.
somatic release, or sometimes they're chilling out and everything in between. And that's because, again, it's like, it's not just the sound, but just the way the sound is used that's so unique to the individual in terms of their needs. That's how my practice has kind of progressed, evolved from the places that I've been, and what I've studied with, like, Fabian, and everywhere else I've touched. That's kind of informed that up until this point.
Beautiful. Yeah, I'd love to touch on there because you've been mentored, right, by Fabian, right?
Yeah.
So it's a different pathway that a lot of other people, other sound healers would take, right? They buy a bunch of singing bowls and just start using them, or buy some clapping sticks, or buy a didge. You know, they start offering sound healings, right? So
Mhm.
I think there's an importance in mentorship that really keeps a sacredness in the art, like you're standing on the shoulders of somebody else. Yeah, we'll speak to that.
Yeah, I completely agree. And, you know, one of the things that I am, like, I just spoke to the facilitator of the ceremonies I used to sit in, because I'm actually going into ceremony this next weekend. And um, for the first time in a while. And he was talking about he was looking at potentially opening an apprenticeship, and he was like, he basically said that it's going to be for a minimum of 9 years for anybody that wants to apprentice with him, right?
Wow.
and
Yeah.
and it reminded me that it's like in most indigenous cultures and ancient cultures that really respected the journey of evolution through like learning a craft and a practice to the point of actually being a master. Like they looked at it in years, they looked at it in
Mm,
decades, they looked at it in lifetimes. And so I think and not that it's all about time, but what that trickles down to me to understand is that, yeah, I think a deeper one-on-one mentorship is definitely is more beneficial. And with Fabian, I didn't get a lot of like one-on-one time with him, but because of the intimacy of the container, and he also
yeah.
he did kind of take me under his wing like a little bit. They really wanted me to kind of be one of the primary people carrying on the lineage. It didn't really work for me because it was a type of modality that wasn't what was kind of confining to what I wanted to do. But because of that, he did show some kind of extra attention, and which
Mm,
was beautiful and beneficial to my practice. And what that's translated to for me is that I actually just took on my first 4-month mentorship program, or started one with a young gentleman that I'm been really enjoying, because there's a sweet, intimate, and just uniquely powerful opportunity when it comes to mentorship in these ways, with whatever
mhm,
medicine it is or whatever practice, that I think is if someone can access it, I do. It's just going to be the ultimate
mm.
opportunity. However long that is. So like we're doing 4 months, right? So it's like what I spoke of before with years. It's not years, and at the same time, it's more than a 2-week course, right?
Totally. I think it's blending what I hear. It's blending the speed of the West with the ritualisticness of the East, right? So like with those, I had a friend who learned how to serve ape, and
Mm.
she stayed with the tribe for years to learn how to do it. And she wasn't shown how to do things. She was like a fly on the wall. So sort of it's like the lead priest of the tribe would come say, come over here and have a look at this while I do this. The priest is doing his thing, right? And then you got to watch. Like, what are you doing? Like, how are you cooking the tobacco? Like, why are you selecting these specific leaves? Like, why is it this time of year? Like, all of the nuanced things that take time. And then when you cross over with how we do things, like in modern day, like, cool, we have a little bit more of a structure, right? You kind of know that, okay, you need to learn this thing and this thing and this thing, and then whatever you get in between, and the questions that you ask of the process is where you get all the juiciest nuggets, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like
Mm,
the gentleman I'm working with, we started under the premise of like a sound therapy mentorship, but we've been going deep into just like the his own kind of internal process, because there's some important elements that are very available to him for immediate healing with the modality. So we like,
mhm,
we're going there and then using the modality that he's wanting to learn from me in order to go there. And yeah, like showing through example, while also like a lot of what I do in those spaces is inviting that intuitive, like
mm,
we actually just met today and doing like a practice. There's a practice utilizing the kind of sacred vowel sounds that are at the foundation of all kind of mm, earth languages, ancient earth languages. And what I like to do with people with this is just to have them chant these sounds and then just describe them, like how is this sound moving through space, like what's the color, what's the feel of,
mhm,
what's the polarity, is there like a masculine feminine feel, or where does it sit in the body, like just those types of things. And that's what really informs my guidance around sound therapy and any really mentorship that I do, because there is a lot of systematized things in the West. And when it comes to spiritual stuff specifically, a lot of it's like built on like nothing.
Yes. Thank
Like
you. Yeah,
there's
yeah.
a lot of this stuff, like, and I see this a lot in the sound healing realm, because it's like, again, when we go into like frequencies, like these particular healing frequencies, um, I've done a lot of research, because I've been very interested, like, where did these come from? And
Mm,
you can trace back the original person sometimes that said it, but then it stops there, because they usually
yeah,
say it came from elsewhere before them, but you can't find that elsewhere before them. So
totally.
there's a lot of that in the spiritual self development type of realms right now. And so I think what is the encouragement, again, going back just to mentorship, is that if you do have the opportunity to be with someone who can help show you the practice, as well as incite that intuition, like when the you describe the your friend that like apprentice for Hape, like, to me that speaks to like the teacher was wanting them to tune in, like, to their intuition, to be like, what's going on here? Like,
Mm,
you tell me what you're seeing here. Like,
yeah, you tell me. Yeah,
and I think that's a great um affirmation to kind of that process, while also honoring the fact that, of course, when it does come to certain things like plant medicines and things that have been passed down through lineage, there is also a process to honor in that.
totally.
So yeah, I think there's just a really strong opportunity there with mentorship of any kind, when you can find someone who isn't so caught in systems,
Yeah.
might be carrying maybe some kind of lineage that does have some, tried and true tactics, or whatever you might want to call it. But my encouragement of anyone seeking mentorship is always like, what are they doing to incite your own intuition around the practice, around your own explorations?
Yeah, I love that. And when you were speaking, then what popped out at me was the concept of hertz,
Mm,
right? And it's based on time. So
mm,
we've created time. So, but when in nature there is no time. So when you're hitting a rock, like hitting rocks together or hearing water, you don't have this. Oh, this is like 4 hertz or 433 hertz because of the frequency of the earth. It's like, no, there's actually a bandwidth of things that comes through. And my brother-in-law is a sound engineer, and we would always talk about like when sound ricochets off something, it changes. So even in the room that you're in, like it's not the same thing anymore, and how your ears receive it, it's not the same thing. Like if you get wax in your ears, or and when you're speaking, we're all liquid crystals, right? So
yeah.
it's not this fixed, rigid. Okay, if I play this specific 111 hertz frequency, I'm going to get this. And,
Yeah.
and doubling off the back of that, this concept of healers that get stuck in their modalities, right? Their systems, and then you said you help them tease apart, like, well, who are you really underneath this system? Because, like, I know for myself when I first started, like I identified as my modality, like this is I am what I've been learned. It's like, nah, there's actually some nuance, there's some analog in there that's who I really am. Talk to me about that journey that you take clients through.
Yeah, absolutely. I love this conversation, and it's interesting because I feel like this is kind of not necessarily a new adventure, but it's something that's just like organically kind of been coming to me, because I'm finding that I'm helping both people who are about to jump into a modality, someone who's like on the spiritual journey, and is going the healer route or the guide or coach route, and they know they want to help people, and they're in this space of like, okay, like, what do I study, like what course, what thing, there's that. And then there are people that like have done some element of that, but are just like not feeling effective in like what
Mm,
they're doing to the point that they know they can. And that part is actually kind of new to me, but at the same time it's part of my journey intrinsically, because that actually happened to me with like, so studying with Fabian and Tamado. His school is called the Tamado Academy, and he had a system. It was a modality and a system, and I tried really hard to make it work after I kind of graduated, but it didn't work for me. to stay
Yeah.
within that modality. And I really didn't, it took me years, really. It took me up until honestly, probably the last couple of years to really just, because even beyond that, I started doing like voice coaching. And when I was doing my voice coaching, I was in my systems. Like I knew that there was like a curriculum I really wanted to teach people. And there were, I had some great client experiences, and I had a few that weren't so great because
Mm.
I was too in my systems. I was too in what I wanted to teach them. And I saw in hindsight, I was like, you know what? I totally was just not in my intuition here. I was forcing too hard to try to teach these things that I thought were the foundation. And what was interesting about that is the first client that what I worked with, actually, we did a sound healing mentorship, but that I really just like dropped all the systems is she came to me to do a sound healing mentorship, and we ended up spending most of the program talking, like just doing
Yeah, wow.
counseling, really.
Yeah.
But still interjecting some things within the framework. But that was just like what was needed for that container at that time.
I love this. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it was just what was needed. And ever since I did that, now I've just been totally dropping into that intuitive process, and it's seriously 10x'd my it more than that. I mean, it's my intuitive process, my ability to serve my clients has skyrocketed as a result.
Thank you for speaking to that, 'cause I see that I had a coach, that I learnt from, say to me once, "Don't be a tool." Like, don't be the tool. Like, there can be you learn a new modality or something, and you wanna deploy it straight away, but sometimes that's not what the person needs. Like, what do you actually need? And being able to intuit, "Okay, this person doesn't need me to, like, do some inner child process right now and force them to look at this two-year-old. They actually just need a conversation around something else." I think there's that intuitive nature is so potent in the world of um, awakening someone, giving them the toolkit to help them remember who they really are.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's very well said. And I have a little kind of anecdotal story about that, because I'm in a kind of a group coaching container right now that we have several different weekly calls. And there was one woman who was new to our container who came in, and she was had just gotten done getting certified through a particular like coaching school, and specifically it was like a particular kind of method or modality.
Mhm.
And so she asked a question that ended up kind of leading to the coach that was helping her out, like just trying to figure out like who does she want to serve. And it took a little while for her to kind of break, because she was framing it within like, okay, well, I just learned this method, so I want to help the people that I know I can help with this method by using
Yeah,
this method. And
yeah.
what the coach was trying to help her out with was like, okay, well, first of all, who do you want to help? Like what are they going through right now that you feel like you really want to help serve and solve for humanity right now? Like, think about the person, like who, if you could think of anyone in the world that needs your help right now, like what are they going through? What's the pain they're feeling right now? And then like start from there, and then okay, where can I use this modality when it is necessary, or when it is part of the process. um and it was really beautiful kind of watching that, because she was super fresh out of that school, and this was the first time she had this kind of interaction in the coaching realm. And it was just beautiful for her to have the aha moments of like, and it's great, anybody that has studied modalities and has gotten certified or feels like they want to do that. I think it is great, because it all leads to a greater awareness and a greater awakening. And the pitfall can be like, now I got to use this thing for a specific
Yeah.
reason, where there is so much power within our own intrinsic skills and intuitive process, and
Mhm.
specifically our life experience. And this is a big part that I work with people in, is that it's like bringing in our own unique life experience. Like
Yes.
what have we walked through that we can then help other people walk through as well? Because that really, on so many levels, has so much power behind it when we
Mm.
integrate that into our practice.
Yeah, I love that you spoke to that. Because I know for me, like I came from that corporate world, 17 years in corporate, started having like I had a relationship breakdown, massive relationship breakdown. I quit my corporate job, and then that's when I started my journey. and I didn't know what to do. Like I'm lost. Like okay, now I'm starting the spiritual journey. Now I see money completely differently. Now I see service completely differently. So what do I do? And I learned a whole bunch of things, and I needed someone to help me shape my product into something that could communicate with people that was still in the place where I was. Otherwise, if I'm talking all this high realm spiritual conversation, they don't get that. And if I look back on my timeline, I wouldn't have understand the terminology that I was using. So being able to bridge the gap and helping the people that I want to help and using the same language was certainly a journey. And having that counsel to go, John, what are you doing? Like it doesn't work that way. You've actually got to have a package that you can deliver as opposed to like marketing yourself as the modality that you are. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it really helps that communication. Mm.
Yeah,
When you
absolutely.
mentioned before about archetypes, and have you heard of Michael Tazarian?
Tazarian sounds familiar. I don't
Yeah, yeah,
that
he's
that word sounds, or that name sounds familiar.
yeah, so he's hugely into archetypes, and I love using archetypes too because I think they're a flexible container for an individual and then the shadow and the collective at large. Like I think it's a really easy way for someone to help identify themselves and where they're at. So for you, what took you to that journey of using archetypes?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, there's a couple of things. Some of my most respected spiritual teachers talk about archetypes. One of them is Carolyn Mace. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Carolyn Mace. Um, her last name is spelled Myss. She's
You're the second.
awesome.
You're the second person that's mentioned her to me. I spoke to a guy yesterday, and he
Really,
mentioned exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
someone's knocking on your door for that one.
Look on my
She's
door.
She is she's awesome. So when I first heard her, I think I was actually on my way to one of my sound healing things with Tamado, and was just really getting into the spiritual healing thing. And I got this audiobook from her, and I listened to the first like 10 minutes of it, and I got super triggered because I was like, this woman is not like the light and fluffy like type of spiritual person. Because at the time I was like thinking, like just the kind of love and light type of spiritual
Yeah,
teacher, and she's totally like East Coast, take no bull. I mean, she's like my partner loves her too, and there's a reason why. Like I love it. She's just straight to the point. She's very grounded, but the reason that she gained notoriety in the first place is that she's a medical intuitive. Like
mm,
she was super 100% accurate with like diagnosing people intuitively, and she was interviewed a lot back in like the, gosh, I think 80s and like 90s, and then just started writing a lot of books. And she's studied and written a lot about the archetypes. So she's one person that influenced that. And there's also a body of work that's called it's actually a channeled text called the Law of One material, the Raw Contact, and the conversation around archetypes in there is very interesting because they explored a lot what they called the archetypical mind. In the later parts of the book, they really started exploring the archetypes of the tarot, like the first major arcana, the first 21 or 22 cards, essentially, and how
yeah,
each one of those represents a specific archetype of the mind. And that really just kind of got me thinking. And they also mentioned in there how, like, really three of the most powerful explorations of the archetypical mind out there, at least from like ancient sources, are astrology with the signs and the planets, and then Kabbalah, and then the tarot, for specifically the 21 major arcana.
mm,
And so once I kind of was introduced to the archetypes through that, I also just started kind of framing the way that certain things seem to express themselves that we then interact with as
mm,
archetypes. Like, and I use this for sound because sounds have archetypes. Like the sound of a bird, for example, is like kind of an archetype, right? To a certain degree. But there's also just I the way that I see archetypes are like they're a universal kind of container of like the expression of consciousness. but then they interact in a unique way with any particular being that they are, filtering through. So
Mm,
like a father archetype, for example, is going to express itself differently through, each different human being, but it contains like a finite structure. Like there's only a specific amount of ways that that archetype can express itself, but then it's made unique through each individual person. That's kind of how I view it in my
mm.
experience.
Yeah, I love that. I love that description. I love that. How yeah, I love that. Um, we're almost getting to time. I just want to ask you another question because this is a juicy conversation. Um, the concept of like the vessel, liquid crystal, and trauma. So, how do you see like trauma and like the fragmentation of an individual, and how does sound play in with like the trauma body?
Yeah, that's a great question. Um, the way that I view trauma, so I definitely look at I work very closely with the primary energy system, and this is kind of a whole rabbit hole, but I make a distinction between chakras and the primary energy system because when you actually look back into the ancient texts, they viewed chakras in a different way. And I actually have this really cool book called The Rainbow Body by his last name is Leland. I think it's Keith or Kurt or something. And he shows the evolution of like Western chakra systems, and I think the what I got out of it is that there's kind of a distinction between the what I would call the energetic organs of the body that we call chakras, and actually in the East, where these systems of visualization and like the spinning wheels were actually things that they used to install mantras and intention to help balance these energetic organs. Um,
Mm,
and there's a couple. I don't know if you'll have show notes, but there's actually a couple little references I can kind of give you. It's like some articles to read on
yeah,
some
I
of these
love it.
things.
Yeah.
Um, but